of the Soyuz spacecraft to the Poisk module itself. Everything is expected to go as planned with those leak checks. Once the hatches are closed and the leak checks get underway, the Soyuz will be transferred to internal battery power, autonomous power as it is known, and at that point Novitsky will be deactivating the Soyuz electrical connections to the International Space Station that has provided power for the Soyuz spacecraft since its docking back on October 25th. Soyuz systems, including the motion control system and its thrusters, have been thoroughly checked out over the past week or so, and the Soyuz is in excellent shape for its re-entry back into Earth and a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Again, the landing scheduled just a few seconds after 10:05 p.m. Central Time tonight, 9:05 a.m. Kazakhstan time on Saturday morning, an hour and 23 minutes after sunrise.
Moscow MKS.
Central Moscow ISS on space to ground 2.
На связи ВСГ-2.
Go ahead, space to ground 2.
На связи ВСГ-2.
Алексей, выполнили съемку.
We are done with
Монтаж. Быстросъемный
video taping of clamps removal.
Вот, значит, по времени приступим.
And per scheduled time, we will start closing the hatch. Yes, let's have the same arrangement, approximately the time that is scheduled, but on our go. Please talk to us before you start closing the hatch.
Олег, ну я вот получил подтверждение.
I received one more confirmation.
Мы можем приступать к закрытию люка.
We can start closing the hatch at the scheduled time. Okay, copy. Oh, there was a short LOS, but I understand.
Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow providing the reminder and choreography of how the hatch closure will take place. Just a reminder for Oleg Novitsky to wait for the go from Russian flight controllers there in Korolyov before he begins that procedure. Once the hatches are closed on both sides of the docking interface between the Soyuz spacecraft and the Poisk module, Novitsky on the Soyuz side of the hatch and Roman Romanenko on the station side of the docking interface will begin a process of leak checks to ensure that we have a tight seal between the Soyuz and the station for the eventual undocking 3 hours, 24 minutes from now. Rewinding 24 hours, yesterday, once again, the weather was horrible, as was discussed by the chief flight director for the Russian side, Vladimir Solovyev, with the crew yesterday, as he indicated that we were waving off a landing attempt for last night due to fog and freezing rain that prevented the Russian search and recovery helicopters from deploying from Kustanay, Kazakhstan, down to Arkelik and the ballistic staging site far to the west at Aktobe. The weather was simply unacceptable. A Russian state commission met yesterday afternoon U.S. time and waved off the landing that was relayed up to the crew, providing a bonus day in space for Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin. But as we mentioned earlier, the low-pressure system and cold fronts that have lingered across the steppe of Kazakhstan and most of southern and eastern Europe, as well as Western Asia, have now passed well to the east of Kazakhstan, yielding clear skies and colder temperatures that will greet the 3 crew members after the hatches are open and they are extracted from their Soyuz spacecraft on the ground at the landing site just to the northeast of Arkelik. The intended target landing site for the 3 crew members is actually 36 miles northeast of Arkelik. The intended landing coordinates are 50.39 degrees north latitude, 67.20 degrees east longitude, the landing occurring about 1 hour, 23 minutes after sunrise, with temperatures expected to be in the mid-teens at landing time to greet, that's Fahrenheit, to greet the 3 crew members once they are extracted from the spacecraft. They will be placed in reclining chairs on the surface of the steppe of Kazakhstan to permit an opportunity for a few minutes for them to acclimate themselves to a gravity environment after almost 5 months of weightlessness. They then will be lifted in those reclining chairs and brought into a nearby inflatable medical tent that will be erected by Rosaviatsia and RSC Energia personnel on scene. The crew will have an opportunity to get out of those heavy Sokol launch and entry suits that they will wear during their descent back to Earth and get into more comfortable flight clothing. After about an hour in the medical tent or so, they will be brought into individual helicopters for a 2-hour flight from the landing site northeast of Arkelik back to the staging city of Kustanay, Kazakhstan. At that point, Kevin Ford will board a NASA plane that is on the ground in Kustanay for the flight back to Houston, while Novitsky and Tarelkin board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft for the flight back to Chkalovsky Airfield outside of Star City, Russia, and a reunion with Russian space officials and their families. For the remaining crew members on board the station, who again formally begin Expedition 35 at the time of the Soyuz undocking this afternoon and this evening, Chris Hadfield, the new station commander who took over command of the station in a change of command ceremony on Wednesday, and Roman Romanenko and Tom Marshburn, they will essentially relax this weekend and have a chance to catch their breath. It's been a very hectic pace of activity on board the station. They'll press right back into a bevy of scientific research work early next week, and will gear up for the departure of the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft on Monday, March 25th. Tom Marshburn will be at the controls at the robotic workstation in the cupola for the grapple, unberthing, and release of the Dragon spacecraft on Monday, March 25th. The Dragon will drift away from the International Space Station for its deorbit and re-entry back to Earth, and a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean about 460 nautical miles west of Baja, California. NASA television will provide coverage of the departure of Dragon through the time it leaves the keep-out zone around the International Space Station. That coverage on Monday, March 25th will begin at 4 a.m. Central Time, 5 a.m. Eastern Time. Once again, we are out of range of our tracking and data relay satellite system, and as a result, we We won't have live video of the hatch closure, the farewells, and the hatch closure between the crew members. That is being recorded on board and will be replayed by Roman Romanenko for us to record here on the ground, and we'll be providing that video for you when we're back on the air for undocking coverage that begins at 6:15 p.m. Central Time this evening. Once again, undocking is scheduled at 6:43 p.m. Central Time, 7:43 Eastern Time. Springs on either side of the docking interface will push off against one another, and 3 minutes after physical separation, the Soyuz will execute a 15-second burn of its engines, a separation burn of about half a meter per second to begin an opening rate away from the International Space Station. The deorbit burn will ensue at 9:13 p.m. Central Time, at a point at which the Soyuz is 12 kilometers away from the International Space Station. That deorbit burn tonight will be 4 minutes, 44 seconds in duration, to slow the Soyuz down by 128 meters per second, enabling it to begin to drop out of orbit for its descent back into the Earth's atmosphere. As we await formal confirmation of the closing of the hatches, which is underway on board the International Space Station, between the crew members on either side of the docking interface, between the Soyuz spacecraft and the Poisk module, we are hearing that the Russian State Commission has given its go for landing, with all of the parameters of the Soyuz spacecraft and weather conditions ideal in the landing zone on the steppe of Kazakhstan. So the stage is set for all of the activities to unfold throughout the course of the day that will bring home Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin.